One thing I think is immediately clear when diving into the responsibilities of educators, of schools, and of principals is there's just too much. There's too much for everybody involved. We're never going to get it all done. We have to pick, right? We have to pick what's important and how we're going to go about doing that. There's just too many expectations. Vollmer's list is an impossible feat, truly. Kowalski talks about the social political frame and the moral ethical frame of education. And so those are two kind of categories that we're looking at, like what are the social or political expectations put upon us as educators, right? What kind of expectations, laws, authorities are kind of in control of what we do. And then it's the moral ethical side, like what are we obligated to create in people? What are we trying to, hope that these humans come away with? And those two expectations are so big and not always very different, but sometimes very different. And which is it that our current culture wants, right? And what do they want out of those things? And then Kowalski goes on to talk about efficient versus effective institutions and how those two things are not always the same, right? You may be efficient, but you may not be effective, and you may be effective, but you may not be efficient. And so that was super interesting to me. Just another thing you have to manage in the terms of responsibility. And so when looking at Vollmer's list, I think it was important to note that not only can you see the volume increasing as you get into the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, but you can see the complexity of the topics increasing, right? The things that are expected keep getting bigger. It's no longer just teaching sex education, abuse education, basic self-care, basic emotional care. Like those are deep and thick things to be teaching. And how are we going to do that in a realistic way is kind of what all of this material is presenting. Right here are all the things we're expected to do. Now, how are we going to do it?